Subscribe to MDR. Like for more.
Over the years, the horror film 1920 has become a cult classic. I thought it was terrifying as a child, and I'm sure you did too, if you have seen it. But don't worry if you have or if you haven't, because now, all these years later, we're going back in time to dive into this film and examine whether it is worthy of its status as a horror classic. Does it still hold up? Is it still as good as we remember? Let's find out. There's a certain mystique about 1920. As a film, it is strange in its pacing, sometimes too slow and sometimes too fast. As a story which is mostly predictable, it does have the backdrop of surprisingly controversial themes like patriotism and religion. It's music that sounds broken, unfinished, and sad, and it's actors who were unseen at the time of the film and remain largely unseen in the current film industry as well. But you might say, wait MDR, stop beating around the bush and get to the point. How is this film so classic in your eyes, especially now that it's been so many years? Well, that is exactly the reason why it would be considered a classic, because it is the type of horror film that is not bound to a subgenre. It is not following a trend like jump scare or slashers. But 1920 falls in the realm of a different kind of horror that is hard to describe. It is psychological, even carries some jump scares. But most of all, it is strange, and though it is not very horror-like in its nature, it is still the best kind of horror. But this might be confusing to understand or even for me to articulate, as you could probably tell. So the best way I've been able to define 1920 as a horror film is, 1920 has an overarching rhythm to its horror, which does not come from watching the film alone, but the feeling that it leaves you with. In this manner, the film is a true masterclass in making its impact last, like the few other classic horror films that do the same. But wait, let us now analyze the aspects that make the film this way. While there are a few scene-to-scene inspirations from various horror films that 1920 finds its image in, like the screaming man in the mist that has a clear similarity to the Pazuzu scene from The Exorcist, or the spear that goes through the priest like in The Omen, or the deeper, more subtle influences like the life that 1920 finds in its mansion, much like the Stanley Hotel of The Shining. Most great horror films, as I have noticed, often find themselves questioning good and evil, more specifically, God and Devil. Selling one's soul is a major theme in such films, and 1920 is very much a film that follows this theme as well. Many examples of these exist in the film, like when the Rathore couple elopes to the city away from their village where Arjun's conservative parents wouldn't allow him to get married to a Christian girl because he himself is a Hindu. One thing is certain, Arjun abandons his religion with the village. In a way, he abandons the India he knows, its mythology, its culture, and its value, and shifts to the more British-influenced buildings, the cities and the towns that are industrializing themselves. This is not done just in belief, because his father might separate him from his lover based on religion, but in literal terms as well, which is noticeable in a sly hint to when they are wedded. Arjun, a Hindu man, is dressed in a suit, while Lisa, a Christian woman, is dressed in a sari. Get it? Besides, the rest of the film was shot in the UK, thus adding a literal layer to its philosophical bedding. Another such instance is of the color red in the film. Red is a color that often symbolizes hell or something evil and is often related to the idea of devil, especially in older texts and films and the popular imagery of the inferno. This is a tradition that's carried on in 1920. When the servant of the mansion takes a bribe from the head of the house to keep the secret of its haunting safe, in the very next scene we see Lisa dressed in red, as if she is the bribe to the mansion, as a red cross lays crooked on the roof of a church. Come on, it's so obvious. But it's so subliminally done that through this chain of events, which is scene after scene after scene, the film sets three ideas in our head without even making us realize. The price is set, the soul is sold, and the deal is made. Coincidentally, in the film's subplot, the Indian soldier who secretly works against the nation in the fight for their freedom delivers information to the British colonizers, who are, and no prizes for guessing, dressed in red. Again, a deal made with the devil. But having clear, subtle imagery isn't the only reason why 1920 is so revered in the eyes of many. It's also the film's look. Its strange, old but new look that I really haven't seen since this film come back to cinema, neither in Bollywood nor in Hollywood. In addition, many scenes of the film have a rounded, fish-eyed look to them, which puts you on guard as the viewer itself. It is a rather weird perspective to have while watching the movie, as everything feels rounded, sphere-like, like a world within the lens, giving every scene a grander look than it would normally have. The film almost looks like a painting in some scenes as well. It's also dreamy and heavenly, and on the contrary, it is also very noisy and dark. The film's story, while rather predictable, does check all the right boxes, and has the unforeseeable twist of an interesting backstory that I quite honestly didn't even remember the film having. In this way, the story of 1920 is nothing special. We've all seen a happy couple or a family move into a new place, finding themselves amidst a haunting, with someone innocent as their target, and the rest is trial and error to correct their ways. But in a way, that is what attributes the 1920s status as a classic, even more. I find that horror films with absolute endings are the worst. They completely ruin the point of the film's horror, which comes from something beyond us, something that is scary, because we do not know what it is or what it is capable of. By having a certain ending, the point of the horror film becomes that it is scary for the sake of being scary, and not actually a horror experience. I can fortunately say that 1920's ending is one of its best aspects. It is so abrupt yet so laden, so serene and still so mystical. Now, if I were to mention any gripes with this film, it would probably be the unnecessary dance song, or how it plays with the most typical color palette, teal and orange, in contrast. But that's only in the darker scenes of the film, so maybe I can let that go. But if anything, these might add to the film's charm as well. I mean, I don't know. For me it does not, but for someone else it might. To conclude really, it's this bizarre feeling I have every time I go back to watch this film or even think about it. But it is the same feeling I have every time I think of films like The Shining, The Omen, or The Exorcist. And maybe arguing technicalities isn't always good. Perhaps a feeling is enough. And that's why I think that 1920 has achieved a classic horror prestige over the years. Let me know what you think in the comments about this video, or about the film itself, if there's any ideas you would like me to do, and such. Thank you for watching.